There's always plenty going on with Microsoft Flight Simulator. This week, the DC6 makes an appearance on the in-sim marketplace, Aeroplane Heaven announced the P51D Mustang, and I take a look at the latest info on the sim from Asobo developers. So, PMDG's DC6 recently arrived on the in-sim marketplace for both the PC and the Xbox. As many will no doubt be aware, PMDG's planes rank amongst the highest quality planes available in a flight simulation today. But just how popular can a plane like the DC6 actually be? Well, in a recent interview on Sky Blue Radio with Robert Randazzo, CEO of PMDG, he revealed a little insight into the plane's popularity. Apparently, when the DC6 was first released for Microsoft Flight Simulator, it sold more copies within the first few hours of release than it sold on FSX, Prepared and X-Plane combined in their entire lifecycle to date. Whilst that doesn't give us any specific numbers, it does tell us just how popular Microsoft Flight Simulator is. It's clear that the sim is reaching a far wider audience than any other sim before it. This in turn is no doubt fantastic news for third-party developers like PMDG. It's also potentially good news for the end user, as the volume of sales potentially means that the developers can release products at a far lower price whilst also maintaining higher profit. PMDG's upcoming 737, which is currently scheduled for release sometime between January and February, is a very good example of this. In his interview, Randazzo said that simmers will be very surprised by the product's lower than usual price point compared to the versions released on other sims. And as an example of this, currently the base package for PMDG's 737 for Prepared is selling at $100. A cheaper price point for Microsoft Flight Simulator then would be very welcome indeed. Meanwhile, if you're thinking about getting the DC6, do check out PMDG's YouTube channel, where they have assembled a collection of fantastic tutorials for the plane. Also, if you're interested in listening to the interview on Sky Blue Radio, you can find a link in the video description. Continuing on with the subject of upcoming planes for a while, Aeroplane Heaven have announced the P51D Mustang. You might remember these developers for their excellent version of the Spitfire that was released back in September. The Spitfire was widely considered to be a fantastic product, so expectations for the upcoming Mustang are pretty high. Like the Spitfire, the Mustang is a World War II plane. The Mustang is an American long-range fighter bomber, and whilst you won't be bombing or shooting anything with it in Flight Simulator, the developers have nonetheless included modelling for the various weapons. You can also see the weapon and ammunition access panels that have been modelled to an excellent degree. The Mustang itself is highly configurable and comes in multiple variations, which includes both military and civilian editions. The military editions can be configured to carry bombs. It's also possible to add additional 500-pound fuel tanks. Inside the plane, there are various hidden switches that further customize the plane, allowing you to switch between traditional radios and modern systems. It's also possible to switch in a target reticule if you so wish. Further switches allow you to change out the pilot and open and close the various engine cowling. Overall, the video shows the Mustang to be extremely visually interesting. Do have a look at the full video in the video description, which is around 7 minutes long. Currently, there's no price point or release date for this one, but certainly it appears to be worth keeping an eye on. Now, moving on to information from the developers. Asobo say that apparently the bush trips have been repaired in Sim Update 7. There was various issues here that were causing save problems. Now, this is a particularly interesting one for me because very recently on a bush trip, specifically today, I had this save issue problem. This is with Sim Update 7. And yes, this was kind of a user error in a certain degree. Basically, during the bush trip I ran out of fuel and had to land on a beach. I kind of wish I had footage of this, I don't unfortunately, but the landing was very successful, the plane unharmed and come to a complete stop, and so the game considered that leg of the bush trip to be complete. When I continued the journey later on, it placed me back on the beach with a plane without fuel, and there's no way to get around this without having to reset back to a previous leg of the journey. And this is essentially the problem I hear many people are having, that the plane just continues, that the bush trips rather, continue at the wrong point. So it seems that this particular issue at least hasn't been fixed with Sim Update 7. You'll also notice that the flight line for the VFR map is still not being drawn correctly for bush trips. Still quite a bit of work to do on these particular issues. Apparently, as far as I can tell, these have been going on since August, so getting on for a very long time now. Meanwhile, with the SDK, Asobo are working directly with bush trip developers to make some improvements there. Essentially, Asobo are aware of all these issues, but it seems there's plenty of work still to be done. Now, moving on to AI-based ATC voice recognition. This will be something that would be absolutely fantastic. The ability to directly interact with ATC via spoken commands. Now, there's nothing concrete on this. Microsoft, however, have said they have done some investigation into it, and there are some possibilities. However, the developers are aware that the current problems with ATC run far deeper, so it seems that those are going to have to be fixed first. Fixes and improvements to ATC will come, however it does require planning, so from the impression I'm getting, it seems Asobo and Microsoft feel that all the fixes to ATC are a bit of a long-term project. The planning is something that Microsoft have said that they're going to be doing over the next few months, so don't expect any immediate fixes for this one. Meanwhile, multiplayer still continues to have various problems, specifically with people disappearing when in flight. Basically, someone in your group will just vanish. Asobo have said that this particular bug is something they are personally very annoyed with. So yeah, it seems this one is also going to get fixed. In related news, they're also looking at expanding groups from 6 to 8. They say there's possibilities within the code to actually do this, and the sim should quite reasonably and quite easily support it. Expect to see this change very soon, they say. FatSim, meanwhile, is also something they want to take a closer look at in order to see how they can better support its use with the Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, something many people noticed with Sim Update 7 was colour banding. This was a particular issue with certain colour gradients on certain types of monitor. Now, this is something that Asobo have looked into, and they found out the cause of the problem. Turns out that it was a setting within the colour matrix code. A switch or a flip or a code, whatever, had been accidentally changed from 16-bit to 10-bit. So this is a very easy thing for Asobo to fix. The slightly disappointing news, however, is that any fixes are going to have to wait for the next update to be deployed. And finally, Microsoft touched on the subject of custom liveries. These would be customizable by the end user, by the simmer. Effectively, an example here was used of Forza, how players in that can actually create customizable paint jobs. This is something that Microsoft are very keen to implement into a flight simulator, but unfortunately it's not on the immediate roadmap. Something for the future then, hopefully, fingers crossed, perhaps for 2022. That then brings us to an end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.